Guys, so I decided to make this video because I do handyman work for a living and I find that a lot of people have the same general problems. These problems can be anything from a toilet to a dryer not working to light switches burning out, and I'm going to try to start doing tutorial videos to help you fix these problems yourself. So what we have today is toilet. It's been leaking when it's in use. She says that it moves around a little. Yep. So the first thing that tells me right there is if it's moving around, it's not sealed anymore, and it's usually sealed by a wax ring. So with that information, I was able to just go ahead and purchase a wax ring beforehand. These came from Home Depot. And now we're going to pull it apart, clean up the floor, clean up the old wax ring, put a new wax ring on, tighten it back down, see how it goes. So you'll be along with me for the ride. Oh man, I got hit by bird poop. On my head. Gross. Okay, so I wanted to show you real quick. I had one bolt just completely break off. You can see there's some water coming out because I had to flush it to get rid of some of the excess water. Okay, and then that one is seized on. It is not moving. So I am going to cut that one off. Luckily, I kind of saw this coming, so I did buy the wax ring kit with the bolts. They make a couple of different models of these, but I have found that the newer versions don't last more than a year or two. So I prefer to get this style that is tried and true, can last you up to 20 years, assuming you actually have your toilet reinforced properly. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to remove the toilet. So let's go over the steps again that got us here. Turn off the water line, okay? What I usually do is it's usually a simple screw. When you mess with a valve, it's almost always going to leak, especially when it's been sitting for a while. So you're going to want to check that when we put everything back together. So we turn off the water line. We disconnect the water line. I usually use right here. It's got a thumb screw, so you can do it by hand. You don't need a tool to do it. But also it allows a little water to drain out. And I use that water to help me clean up the calcified urine and water that's on the tile, thus giving us a cleaner floor to put the toilet back onto. So then we're going to disconnect the bolts on the sides. Those two bolts are 7/16 bolts, nuts, sorry. And now you're ready to do it. So at this point, I'll take this guy off and I'll tip the toilet forward. And when I do that, the water's going to shift around. It's in the tank and the bowl already. And now the water's going to want to go somewhere. So what I do is tip it forward and then put it right back on, right where it came from. That water will slosh around and try to come out the bottom, and then it'll go right down the drain. So it helps you to not make a mess. Generally, I'll also usually have a big trash bag that I'll just put the whole thing on top of because it will leak still, and it's gross. So I'll go find one before I do that part. Okay, so you're going to see me pull the top off. It's heavy, it's fragile, be careful. Oh, that's loose too. So we're going to want to set that back again. So I'm just trying to get the water to slosh around and get it to dump out. Yeah, I can already see that some of it's not going anywhere. So to clean it, we're going to need to tip this thing pretty far forward. Now, I'll show you the bottom. I'm not going to show you all of it because it's too hard to get the camera angle in. But you can see that it gets pretty dirty when you have a mess. So I'm just going to lift this out of the way for a moment. And you can see that, yeah, it gets pretty gross. A lot of it is not what you think. It's just mostly buildup of small stuff. But we need to take off this whole thing. This is the old wax ring. This is the old seal on the inside. We need to get rid of all that, clean up all this so there's no more hazards. And also we're going to tip the toilet and clean under there as well. I'm pretty sure that 90% of the wax ring is on here and not on the toilet, so we'll see. The main reason that I put the plastic under the toilet is so if there is wax on the toilet still, it will not get on the floor, because I don't want to clean it off more places than I need to. Okay, so let's go over what we had. We have the toilet, we took it to the shower, and we cleaned off the bottom. That was a little more challenging than I expected, but it was pretty dirty. So on the bottom you could see that it had been leaking out the side for some time, so it was pretty dirty. Over here, where we have this is an iron, old home iron toilet seal, or flange. And you can see that the iron pipe inside has actually started to rot away. So that's where the wax ring is really going to shine, because it's going to keep this from rotting away a little bit more. We've got the type of flange that, or wax ring, that goes down and it makes it dump into the middle instead of right on the edge there. So it's going to keep it from letting any water come up under the edge here. So the problem is, whoever the tile guy was that did the tile in here, he was not planning for ever having to replace this wax ring, because you cannot get the bolts out. He cut it too tight, and this is an old style where they have to come out the side. Most days now, if you buy one or have one, it has a little slot and you slide it over and then turn it and it sits right there, and another slot that you slide it over. So this one is a little more complicated, so I've got my grinder out and I'm going to cut little slots here and little slots here to see if I can make enough space to get those out and new ones in. So follow along with me. Okay, this one drives me crazy. So I see this quite a bit with homeowners and homeowners work. What happens is they'll put this in and you're supposed to lean this over. Oh, it's filled with rust, so there we go. Work it in, and then they'll put this, and then they'll put the toilet on, and then they'll take this little piece and put it on top of the toilet. And I see it 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3 toilets. It's pretty common. So this is actually just to hold this bolt straight up and down right here. That's all its purpose is. It just is going to keep pressure on that so your bolt doesn't move while you're trying to get this in place. So we're going to take the same thing with the other one, lean it, get it into its spot. Now, don't push down on it. You got to pull up on the bolt while you're doing it. That way it gets nice and tight and it's straight up and it holds really well. because it's going to also keep the bolt from spinning a little bit as we go. So let me get my gloves on, and then we will put this wax ring set on. So the biggest thing with wax rings is they're messy. Any way you split it, they're going to be messy. When you take them off, when you put them on, they're kind of messy. Sticky wax, it's made to seal, it's made to be waterproof, and it works well. It's been working this way for quite a long time. So my big trick is I don't like one wax ring. I use two. So I buy the extra thick reinforced to go on the bottom. It's got that little sleeve to funnel the water straight down. And then I'll take just a regular $1.89 wax ring and put that right on top. And then I'll kind of work the two together so they're bonding. And it's not just sitting on there so it can slide. I want it to be stuck together. So I'll put it on and then I'll kind of smush it just enough to start getting into contact. And then work it a little bit. So I want it to start contacting the ground and also bonding to the other. So I'll work those two waxes together. Now, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't do that, it just blah, blah, blah. I've never had a toilet leak that I've done this, but I've had toilet leaks where I've only used one wax ring. So I feel much more confident doing two and dealing with the mess and never having a leak than only having one and having a leak that you got to deal with all the time. Or doing it again. There's nothing worse than putting on a wax ring and it doesn't seal and you have to pull the whole toilet off and do it all over again, which will happen. It is not uncommon. Most of the time now I don't ever have an issue, but you know, like this one, it's a special situation. Things could go wrong, and just because it doesn't seat really well, it may cause it to break the seal again, and so I might have to start over. So the main goal is to get the water to funnel down here and not want to come outside. So I work it together, but I keep the wax pretty straight up so that when I put the toilet on, it contacts this wax solidly and starts to spread it as it wants to, not as I want it to. So it's pretty bonded together now. I've smashed it. I've worked the actual wax edge together. And I don't want it to be slanted at all because it'll push the top wax ring out of the way. So now that we got it nice and solid and straight, I'm just making it thicker in general. We're gonna go grab the toilet. Pause. Okay, so now we're going to set the toilet in place, and this is the same thing. You check your bolts, make sure they're nice and straight up again because they'll fit right into the slots on those ones. When you set it back down, you're looking for this spot right here. See how it comes down and it jogs? Wherever that spot goes straight down, usually it's right in line with the bolts. That's where it's going to meet the bolts. So I usually tip it back on the front end, and then I will do this squat with my legs and kind of hold the whole toilet with my knees and my arms on my knees. So you just guide it down until you see one bolt. Don't put it down until you see both bolts coming out. I don't see the other side. There we go. Okay, so I got one. Where's my other one again? Okay, so I got both bolts. Make sure they're still pretty straight up so you're not off to the side. Now I just let the toilet do the weight. I don't really force it yet. I let that just kind of settle on its own. Check right now that your toilet is straight and it's not going on crooked, because you don't want to move it after you've got the seal smashed to the ground. So now I've got it pretty well seated. So I'm going to clean up the little spots here. Most of that will be covered, but I still try to make it better than I started. I'll get my little scraper and get that cleaned off better. Toilet looks pretty straight overall. Alright, cleaned off. So at this point, you're going to put your washer down. I kind of usually find a good solid spot for the bolt. And then put your nut on. And now I've found that instead of putting your nut on this direction, let me see if I can focus. Anyways, it's got a rounded head. So if I flip it over and do this, what happens is it finds the center of that washer, and it also starts to find the center of this hole. And so it will actually support better on the more sides this way than it will just using the flat part of it. I've gotten a lot of unruly toilets to seat using that trick. So you just want to tighten it down to the point where it starts to bend the washer. You can kind of feel, but you don't want to overdo it. This is not the time to be Hercules. You can crack a porcelain toilet pretty easily. So once I got the bolts on, I'm going to check and see how wobbly it is. We need to know what we're dealing with here. Okay, so just finger tight for now. And it's solid. No front to back, no side to side. So I'm going to tighten those down. Another tip real quick is if you feel a washer, it's punched out of sheet metal. So usually on one side you'll feel a sharper edge and the other side will feel rounded. And what that means is the rounded side is the bottom of where it punched out and the top is what's left as it punched it down. So you want to put the round side towards the porcelain. Don't put any sharp edges where it's going to bite. Focus. 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 There we go. It was having a brain fart. So I've got my 7/16. Give it a couple cranks on one side, a couple cranks on the other side, and then feel how solid it is. If it feels a little wobbly, give it a little bit more, but not too much. You do not want to over crank a toilet. You'll feel the washer just starting to bend a little bit. And that should be all. You don't want to give it a whole bunch. Here we go, nice and solid. So, something you may not know. The blue that you put in your toilet, yes, it makes the water look very pretty and everything, but it is really hard on the hardware. So that's a bolt down there and it's completely black because it is rusting over. It will definitely eat your hardware within a few years, so keep that in mind if you ever use some sort of blue for your toilet. Okay, so at this point I got the water line hooked up again and we're ready to test for leakage. So the tank just filled. What we're looking for is water seeping out under here. You usually will see it just come right out the side. This is a low spot, so if water's going to come out, it's most likely going to come from there. So it looks good. Well, thanks for following along with me. Hopefully you learned something, and next time if you need some help, call me or watch the next video. Well, that's it for me. Thanks for following along. If you guys have any more tips or tricks that you want to know, let me know, and I'll make a short video about it. See you next time.